Gradients. Okay, let's talk about these. You can see on my screen, I have a red ball. This is a 3D rendering. It's not a real red ball, but it is a raster image. And I want to reproduce this ball in Illustrator using gradients. So I've got some artwork that's pre-prepared here. Open up my layers panel, and first I'm going to show you the different types. So we've got a linear gradient, okay? This is simply going from a dark red over to a full red. Okay, I'm not able to really capture that white dot accurately with a linear gradient. The linear gradient can work well with shapes and compound shapes. I'll get to that in a second. A freeform gradient allows me to edit different points on the gradient. Okay, so I can double click on any one of those points. I drop a color from my original raster image. Okay, so that's what a freeform. It allows you to put points anywhere along your shape. And the nice thing about this is this also works with shapes and compound shapes. The third one is a mesh gradient. The mesh gradient starts from a shape, and then you overlay this mesh. It's kind of like a netting right on top of your object. And from here, you will assign colors to every place that that mesh intersects. So you would do that by taking your direct selection tool, key command A, clicking right on one of those anchors, use your key command I for the eyedropper tool, and pick a color from your original image. Again, hit A, click your anchor, I, sample. Okay, it's a bit more effort. It's quite a bit more effort, but generally it gives you a more polished, finished look. So looking at my layers again, I'm just going to talk about those shapes I mentioned. So in the bottom here, I have two circles. One is a shape and one is a compound shape. It's quite basic. A shape does not have any cutouts on the inside. A compound shape does have a cutout. Okay, so when you're thinking about which one of these to use, you have to consider what shape are you trying to fill in. If it's a shape with a cutout in it, you're probably best off to use a freeform gradient because a mesh gradient won't allow you to create that cutout. If I try and do it, let's put a little cutout in front of my freeform. Just a little circle. Put it right in the middle. I can select this, head over to my shape builder tool, hold down my Alt key, and remove the center. Okay. If I try to do that with my mesh gradient, and I select both, head over to my shape builder tool, hold down my Alt key, it just removes that top shape. It doesn't do a cutout. That's because mesh gradients only work with shapes, not compound shapes. I'm going to just undo what I did there and show you one last thing. So here's a continuum, okay? So two things you need to consider is control and effort. The mesh gradient requires the most amount of effort. So if you're looking for a challenge and you're looking for that realistic effect, this can be very, very good option. The linear gradient, on the other hand, requires very little effort. You can very quickly assign two colors and boom, you've got a gradient. The other thing to consider is control. You have the least amount of control with a linear gradient, a little bit more with the freeform gradient, but you have the most amount of control with that mesh gradient. And part of that is because you have further editing power with handles. You can change the curvature of your shape to edit many things at once and give a really realistic contour and effect to your final object. So consider which gradient you want to use based on the final result that you want to have.